Today we're going to start Zion Amid Beis. Amar Rava, let's see. It's about 15 lines from the top. I'm going to start from Amar Rava. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day in the morning. We should have the schus of our learning, we should have the base of Migdash. And for Shleima, for Yechiel Nassim Ben Sarah, Aaron, David Alevi Ben Menucha, the Lester, and Avram Rafal and Sarah. So Amar Rav, Mechayev Inish Lebesumi Bepuri Ad Layada Ben Araham Levarach Mordechai. Rava says that a person is obligated to get drunk on Purim until he doesn't know the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. Yeah, a lot of interpretations for that. I think the easiest one is that he falls, like the Rambam says, he drinks and he falls asleep and then he doesn't know when he's asleep. That's the easiest. Otherwise, there's hangovers. Rabba v'Rab Zera avdu sudas purim bahadi adadi. The Rambam actually writes that it's wine. And so the people that are makbid, like all the chumras, they only drink wine on Purim, not tequila and vodka and it's just wine. That's because the Lashon Rambam is wine. But from this Gemara, it doesn't say, it just says lebesumi. You don't know it.
The word is the word besume a separate word as drug, or is it coming from the word besume?
I don't know the Aramaic, but it's an Aramaic word which may mean directly drunk.
That would relate to wine. There's an aroma to a wine. That can say besume.
I would look it up in a targum somewhere in maybe by light. I don't remember what it says, but I want to know what the Aramaic is. Yeah, but that's the Hebrew, right? Okay, I don't know. Rabba v'Rab Zera of the Sudas Purim b'Hadei Adadi. Rabba and Rab Zera made a Sudas Purim meal together. Ibsum, they got drunk. So come Rabba Shachti Rab Zera. Rabba got up and he slaughtered Rab Zera. L'machar by Rachmi v'Achi. The following day, he asked compassion and he healed him. He called it Salah. The Rebbe learns that Rabba is on a higher level than Rab Zera, and he brought him to a higher level that he wasn't able to handle, and his neshama left. So Shachti is ein v'shachar alav v'mashach, right? He drew him up. So Lashana Amarle, based on the Marsha, learns like that. Lashana Amarle, the following year, he tells him, Nesimar ben Avid Sudas Purim b'Hadei Adadi. Come, let's have a Purim feast together again. It was great last year. Miracles don't happen every time. You can't, just because you had a miracle once, doesn't mean that you can start relying on that. Okay. Yeah. It's famous sikha from the Rebbe on this. Amar Rava, it's actually maybe based on something that his father said. Maybe based on his father's writings. Amar Rava, Sudas Purim she'achla balayla. Rava says that someone eats the Purim meal by night, la yatsi yedei chivasi. You don't fulfill the obligation. By night is after the Megillah reading. Everyone's like, this is like a great excitement. Let's go do something. But really, there's no mitzvah then to have the meal. The meal is the following day. My time, it says, Yimei Mishta v'Simcha ksiv. It's written, the days of Mishta v'Simcha, not at night. The meal has to be by day. We usually start the meal on Purim day, and we continue it by night, and that's considered that it was by day. Rav Ashi Avi Yosef Kamed Rav Kana. This is common. Rav Ashi and Rav Kana. Rav Kana is, of course, the much later Rav Kana. There's Rav Kana, the student of Rav, the one that has to run to Eretz Yisrael. He's under Rav's bed. That's one Rav Kana. And then there's a Rav Kana that's a teacher of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi has a lot of discussion with him. And so Rav Ashi is in front of Rav Kana. Oh, and there's another version here that it's a Meimar. That would have been a friend of it. Naga v'layasir Rabbanan. The other rabbis came late, or it was delayed, and they didn't show up yet. Amalei, my time v'layasir Rabbanan. So one says to the other, not sure who to who, he says it's probably Rav Ashi says to Rav Kana, probably, what's the reason that the rabbis aren't here yet? Yeah, so now you add in the words, Amarle, Dilmatri de Besudas Purim. He says maybe they're busy with the Purim meal. Apparently, he's coming to a shiur on Purim. And the rabbis are not at the shiur, and they're busy eating. Drinking. Amarle, couldn't they have eaten it the night before? Last night? They could have eaten it last night. What are they doing now? Amarle, Leshmile Lamar. Does the master not know? So it sounds like maybe it's the other way. That this was Rav Kana to Rav Ashi because Rav Ashi calls Rav Kana Mar, at least in the Gemara Sukkah.
Who is Rav Kana in this chart?
Well, there's two Rav Kanas. One should be slightly above Rav Ashi. On the side. Yeah. Then I don't have a sukkah here.
So he was contemporary, like.
Yeah. One Rav Kana, that's a student of Rav. Yeah, that's clearly not this one. Then there's Rav Kana too.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So Rav Kana would call, Rav Ashi would call Rav Kana Mar. It's interesting that Rav Kana, who's the teacher, doesn't know what Rav Ashi is telling him. You don't know what Rava said. You can't eat the meal at night. Eat the meal at night. You don't fulfill the obligation. There's different versions over here. It says I didn't hear that. So Tanamine Aboin Zimnin. One second. Rava would be after the Rabba and Rav Zera?
Right. No, I'm saying, I mean, last year, the year before, wasn't already an established custom that you have a Purim by day.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone here around have a Purim by night.
I hear what you're saying.
Unless they really drank, that they wouldn't drink.
I hear what you're saying.
Like, what's the how?
Mesh is asking, what were they doing all that time? Were they having, maybe they were eating a meal also. And maybe they're having a meal there. Nah. Yeah. How was it that how were they celebrating? How does Rava come along and tell me, what were they doing before then? I'm not sure. So learned from him 40 times. It was as if it was placed in a kisa, like in his pocket. He learned it. He repeated it a bunch of times till he remembered it. Isn't that interesting? It takes 40 times to get that.
Did this story really happen with Rabbi Zera and trying to call him when he was intoxicated?
Yeah. The way the commentaries learn it is that there was no blood involved. It was, he brought him to a higher level that he wasn't able to handle, and the neshama went up or something, but it wasn't like a knife dripping blood and all of that. Yeah. Okay. Ein bein Yom Tov l'Shabbos aleichel nefesh b'lvad. We continue with the Ein Beins. Yeah, and because of the Ein Bein, before we started Ein Bein with Adar Rishon to Adar Sheni, we were talking about Purim. Now we're going to go all over Shas. We're going to end up in every Masechta, every Seder because of this. So now we go to Masechtas Beya because of the Ein Bein. There's no difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos aleichel nefesh b'lvad, except for food food preparation. Eichel nefesh is things that we do on Yom Tov, we cook and etc. What about preparing the tools, the knife, to shech? You're allowed to shech on Yom Tov. What about preparing the knife? You have to sharpen it on the stones. What about preparing the knife? Are you allowed to do that? So it says no. It's just like Shabbos. It's both equal. Masnisin like Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah doesn't follow Rabbi Yehuda. The diak of the Mishnah, because the diak tells me that machshirei echel nefesh is aser even on Yom Tov. Preparations for food, preparations for preparations of food. All right, so that's aser. So that doesn't fit with Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya, because it was taught in a brisa. Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos elo echel nefesh, and Rabbi Yehuda mater af machshirei echel nefesh. Rabbi Yehuda allows even preparing the utensils for preparing the food. My time at the Tanakama. Why does the Tanakama not allow machshirei echel nefesh, preparing, let's say, we'll use the example, sharpening the knife. Amar kra, hu levadai, it's a pasuk says hu levadai, our pasuk just goes who? It. V'lai machshirav. Only it is permissible, but not the preparations for it. Rabbi Yehuda, what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? How did he get that you're allowed to even prepare? You're allowed to even prepare. Just make sure that's a Megillah. Look at it. Okay. That you're allowed to even prepare the knife. It says lachem. Hu levada yasa lachem. Only it alone could be done for you. No, but for you is inclusive. Anything that's for you, anything that you need to sharpen the knife, that's good. But the Tanakama also has that same pasuk. They don't have different Torahs. It says lachem. It says lachem v'lei lachem v'lei laklavim. So you know that you're not allowed to invite a non-Jew to your meal on Yom Tov, which you're allowed to on Shabbos if you have the proper wine, mavushal wine, and all of that. But on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to, even with all of those considerations, because you're not allowed to prepare food for a non-Jew on Yom Tov. It's only hu levada yasa lachem, only for you. You're not allowed to have a non-Jew. You're not allowed to have. They show up, it's fine, but you're not supposed to invite them. So, because he's not supposed to prepare for them. That's the issue. You can't prepare. Eichel nefesh is not for a non-Jew. Yeah. That's why the big deal with the Seder. You can't have a non-Jew at the Seder. It has nothing to do with the Seder. It has to do with the Yom Tov. If the Seder would be on Shabbos, it would be Friday night, Pesach, then it would be permissible. Because you can't prepare food on Shabbos. So there's no concern. Which, yeah. You
mean if the Seder was on Motzei Shabbos?
On Motzei Shabbos, but you can still prepare it on Motzei Shabbos.
Can't prepare it on.
It's Yom Tov.
Can't prepare it on Shabbos.
Yeah,
it's the
we
preparation
prepare earlier because we're so organized. But
isn't this dealing with the aspect of preparing from? No, that's for the Yom Tov you couldn't prepare.
You see, on Yom Tov you can cook. You say, oh, there's another guest. Oh, look, he showed up with his whatever. So with his wife. Yeah, that's what happens, unfortunately. So I'll throw in another piece of meat. That would be forbidden. So lachem, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Lachem doesn't teach me. I'm sorry. Lachem, that's what the Rabbanan say. According to Rabbi Yehuda, lachem teaches me that you're allowed to do machshirei echel nefesh. According to the Rabbanan, it's coming to exclude the non-Jew or for animals. The idach. What does Rabbi Yehuda do? Nami haksiv hu. It says that's an exclusion. Only it alone should be permissible. So it says ksiv hu, ksiv lachem. He has both. He has an exclusion and he has an inclusion. The exclusion is who? The inclusion is lachem. So ksiv hu, ksiv lachem. Kam b'machshim shef shalaseis miyerav yom tov. Kam machshim shef shalaseis miyerav yom tov. Even Rabbi Yehuda, that allows machshirei echel nefesh, is only if you weren't able to do it from before. For example, the knife got a nick in it on Yom Tov, you're allowed to fix it. But you were supposed to prepare that knife before Yom Tov. If you're shechting a few animals during one of the shchitas or something, or bang, it got a nick, so you can fix it. So he has an inclusion and an exclusion. The who actually excludes things that you could have done beforehand. But if you weren't able to, so then it's included with lachem. The next Mishnah. What's the difference in Shabbos and Yom Kippur? There's no difference, except that if someone violates Shabbos, there's punishment by hands of man, which means in court, there's a death penalty, if there's witnesses. And if someone violates Yom Kippur, so then it's kares, which means by heaven. Yeah, we're talking about eating on Yom Kippur. I think malacha on Yom Kippur is malacha on Yom Kippur. I thought was only a lav, only a malchus, but eating on Yom Kippur is kares. What is the pasuk? No, that's on Pesach. It says Tanu es nafshi seichem. Kol nefesh. Yeah, I forget the pasuk, but anyway, it has to do with eating. Okay, so Hala Inyan Tashlumin. The Gemara throws us into another concept, like a Baba Kama and concept. Hala Inyan Tashlumin, but when it comes to payment, Zev Zeh Shavin. What does it mean, payment? Payment means that if someone would violate Shabbos while he's causing damage to another person, it burned down his haystack, his granary or something. So because of the violation of Shabbos, he gets a death penalty. But because of the damage that he's causing, he has to pay for the damages. So the rule is that kamle b'derabamine, you get the larger punishment. They absolve him from the fine, from the parking ticket. Yeah, there's some people that's very important. Yeah. Okay. So for the inheritors. So and the same thing would apply to Yom Kippur. How would he do this? On Yom Kippur, I don't know an example, but if there would be both together, kares with the payment, maybe he ate someone's food, I don't know. So he would be absolved of the payment of the to the other person because of the larger punishment that he's getting, which is kares. So we're doing this comparison here, kares to misus bezdin, excision to the death penalty by the court, that both of them absolve of the lesser punishment. Mani Mas Nisan, who's the author of the Mishnah? It says Reb Nechunya ben Akana. It's Reb Nechunya ben Akana. We're lucky. We don't have Reb Nechunya ben Akana often, except for every day on a Bekayach, right? He's the author of on a Bekayach. And if you say the prayer before you come in, I don't have it in my Gemara, but some Gemaras have a prayer at the beginning. It says the prayer when you enter the Beis Medrash. Yeah, those Gemaras have it. And, it says Shalai Yichshal bi Yismachu bi Chaverai. I think that's Reb Nechunya ben Akana. The Sefer Abar. Okay, right, the Kabbalistic work. Sefer Abar. So the Tanya was taught in a Brayso. Reb Nechunya ben Akana hayoises Yom Kippurim keshabbos letashlumin. Reb Nechunya ben Akana makes Yom Kippurim like Shabbos for payment. Ma Shabbos mischay benafshu patim minat tashlumin. Af Yom Kippurim mischay benafshu patim minat tashlumin. The same thing. He's mischayev benafshay. He's guilty with his life. So on Shabbos, I know it's referring to the court, and on Yom Kippur, I know it's referring to death penalty. Well, it's not death; it's a kares, excision from heaven. And nevertheless, we say the rule of kamle b'deramene that we only give him the larger, the more severe punishment, not the lesser one. Okay. Tanan Hasam. It's taught in a Mishnah. Kol chayav krisis shalaku niftiru midei krisasan. Someone that's chayav krisis that ends up getting malchus, he's exempt from kares. Shenemar v'nikla achicha leinecha kiven shalak areo kachicha. Your brother is hit in front of your eyes. That means that once he's hit, he's considered your brother. Divri Reb Chananya ben Gamliel. That's the words of Chananya ben Gamliel. Yeah. Based on this Gemara over here, they wanted to reinstitute the Sanhedrin after the Spanish Inquisition, because there were a lot of people that had converted to Christianity. When they made it out of Spain or Portugal or wherever, they wanted to be absolved of the punishment because they converted. So they wanted to get Malchus. The problem is that you need a best in Sanhedrin. You can't just get 3 guys and say, hit me. You need an actual Sanhedrin. So the Mari Beirav, based on the Rambam, he said that if all the sages of Israel will get together, we can reinstitute the Sanhedrin. So they got all the sages except for one that contested, and they said we can redo this. And so they created a Sanhedrin. They redid the smicha, and they gave the basis of smicha and everything. And the idea was to be able to give these people malchus, so that they should be absolved of the kares that they were concerned about. And then who was it? Mari ben Lev, the Ralbach, Reb Levi ben Chaviv, I think. He said, no, the whole thing is not, that's not how it works. And they wrote to the Radvaz, who was the rabbi then in Egypt. And he was the expert in the Rambam. And that fell apart. Until, of course, Rabbi Steinsaltz. And, yeah. It's based on the Rambam. On Erev Yom Kippur? Yeah, could be. It's based on Erev Yom Kippur. We get like a token symbolic malchus. Okay.
Did they ever get reconverted?
Where did I read that? Where am I holding? The malchus takes away any other the other punishment of kares. However, Amar Rabbi Yochanan chalukah olav chaveirav al Reb Chanani ben Gamliel. That's only one opinion. The friends of Chanani ben Gamliel, the rabbis, they argue. Amar Rava, Amri Beirav, Rava says that in Yeshiva of Rav, they said, Tanina, I'll prove it to you that they argue. Why? Because it says, Ein ben Yom Kippur l'Shabbos el shezes zedayni b'di adam zedayni zedayni b'kares. V'misi dividi b'di adam hu. You know what? If our Mishnah would agree with Chanani ben Gamliel that you can give malchus, and that would take away kares. Now malchus is done by a bezdin. Kares is done by heaven. So it turns out that zeb zedayni b'di adam, the zez zedayni b'di adam, because you can give malchus instead of the kares. Someone eats on Yom Kippur, you give him malchus, and it's both Shabbos and I know one is a different punishment, but it's both in court. So the Mishnah won't fit. Obviously, the authors of the Mishnah argues on Chanani ben Gamliel. Okay, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says not necessarily. But you know what we can do? We can say Hamani Reb Yitzchaki, Damar Malchus b'chayav krisis leka. Can say that there's no such thing. Titania was taught in a brisa. Rabbi Yitzchak Kaimer chayve krisis bechlal hayu v'lam yatzis kares ba'achaysay laduna b'kares v'lei b'malchus. That you can't give malchus to someone that has kares. Why? Where does he get this from? So we have all the forbidden relations are all listed out, and it says that someone that violates them, 36. Yeah, someone violates them, gets we read it on Yom Kippur, gets kares. And then it says another pasuk about someone that lives with his sister gets kares. So why did I have to separate that? It's coming to tell me that there's only kares and not, there's a rule that anything that's separated from the general is it's coming to tell me about everything. That there's really that the kares that's said by all of the other forbidden marriages are only kares and not malchus. Rav Ashi says, "Afilu temer rabbanan." You know what? You can even say that the rabbis hold exactly like Hanani ben Gamliel, Rabbi Hanani ben Gamliel, and it could be Malchus. But ze ikr zedayni b'diyadim, ze ikr zedayni b'ikaris. I know that if you end up giving Malchus to someone that has karis, the karis goes off. But that's not the original, the prescribed punishment. So the Mishnah is talking about the prescribed punishment, not what you did instead of that. And that way, we don't have to say that our Mishnah is arguing on Hanani ben Gamliel, because our Mishnah is just giving the prescription, right? Not what you did in the Evid, right? After the fact. Okay, we're on top of Ches. The Mishnah says like this. Someone can prohibit himself from having benefit from his friend. He can also prohibit his friend from having benefit from him. But let's say he says, I don't want to have any benefit from you. I'm taking a vow not to have any benefit from his friend. Or he says, I'm not going to eat from you. What's the difference if he says any benefit or if he says he's not going to eat? So if he says any benefit, then he's not even allowed to walk through his property.
Right.
And he also, if he says any benefit, he also can't borrow vessels from him. And we're talking about vessels, utensils, tools, equipment that are not necessarily rented, that are not rented. If there are things that are rented and he's giving it to him for free, then he would be having benefit. No, he would be having benefit that benefit could buy food. Because that's a certain, he's actually every monetary value that he's getting is theoretically able to be used to buy food. So he said I wasn't going to have a food benefit from him. Not going to have food from him, but turns out he gave him coins that he can then use to buy food. So it has to be something that is not rented, and it's not used for food either. If it would be used for food, then it would be also considered, he borrows a spice grinder or something, that would be considered food benefit.
So if the guy wants to borrow someone's lease law, go pick up food.
So he wouldn't be allowed to. Yeah. Even if he only prohibited the food, he says, I'm not going to eat by you. That's considered eating. Because he's getting money or monetary value that could be used for food. The Gemara says, but everyone would, for both of these, whether it's mudar hana, any benefit, which would prohibit all utensils, or if it's food benefit, he's not going to get food from him. If it would be a utensil that's used for food, a blender or something, a pot, sandwich maker, so zev shavin would be prohibited. Okay, Drisa Seregel, walking through his property. He says, what's the problem with that? Halei kapti inchi. People don't mind if you walk through the property. Why is it prohibited if he says that I'm not going to have any benefit from you, and then he wants to walk through the property? It says, Amar Rava Hamani Rebbe Lezer Damar Viter Aser B'Mudar Hana. Even something that's Viter. Viter is overlooked, like Mavater. Yeah.
Why would someone make a vow not to get food from somebody else?
He's upset with him.
That's it. When they take it out that way.
Yeah. Yeah. He would say, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And then it says, okay.
Little kids do that.
Yeah.
But big kids aren't supposed to.
Big kids are big kids. Yeah, my daughter was a counselor in a daycare a little years ago, and the kids were very like, I want this cookie, I want that size of this. They were always like, very, always arguing. What is it called? Yeah, they're fussy about. So they gave out a Mevater prize. If they let the other one have the red one, they get a Mevater to be, Mevater means to overlook,
This wasn't a Gan Yisrael.
It wasn't a Gan Yisrael. Very good. Okay.
Explain again this thing about the property.
Yeah, the Gemara says that if he doesn't, people don't mind when you walk through their property. So why is it prohibited? If he just overlooks it, let it. The guy, he says, I'm not going to have any benefit from Reuven. Reuven owns a property. Now it's easy for him to get to Shul to walk through the Reuven's property. Now Reuven lets everyone walk through. He says, why is it considered benefit? He doesn't mind. It's not like you're taking something from him. It says no viter, even that overlooking is also considered a type of benefit, even when things are overlooked.
But didn't you learn previously that you, in this case, would have so that people.
Yeah, there was a Gemara like that. That if they started, yeah,
No,
mates.
you had to make an access and an egress through your property. In other words, it sounded like it was a clear.
Yeah.
Someone with a field in the way.
Yeah, you're bringing up an interesting point. What Dr. Stein is bringing up is that if it would be a Meitzar Shechzika Berabim, if it would be a path that the Rabbim has already overtaken, where the person is not allowed to stop them, would that be considered that he's having benefit from the person as well? That's an interesting point.
That's a takana on the owner.
Yeah.
It's not a problem for the user.
Yeah.
This is about the user.
I know.
saying, "I'm gonna use it."
So let's say the user says, I'm not going to have a na from that person, and that person happens to have the Meitzar Shechzika by Rabbim. Is that path a Rabbim or is that Reuven? It's a good question. You follow?
It's like saying, I'm not gonna use that right. I'm not gonna use my right to.
Right. But it depends whose property it is. Is it considered public property or is it considered Reuven's property? And Reuven just can't stop them. Right. So would that be prohibited? He's prohibiting himself, but now that he prohibited himself, is he allowed to go? Right? It's a good
Easement is
question.
Not public property. Easement, right? What's called an easement is not public domain. So it's.
I don't know.
That's-
I don't know. That's a question.
you make that
Okay.
up.
Can you park on his swale?
Ah.
Okay. Ein bein nedarim lenedavis. Elashan nedarim chayav b'achriusin and nedavis ein chayav b'achriusin. If someone takes a pledge, he pledges something to the temple, let's say a sacrifice. So the neder is when he says, I accept on myself that I'm going to bring a sacrifice. And the dava is when he says, I'm going to bring this animal as a sacrifice. Now, the difference between I'm accepting on myself or if I'm going to bring this is if the animal gets lost. If he said, I'm accepting on myself, and then there's an animal that he has and the animal gets lost, you can't just say, well, I lost the animal, so now I'm not bringing it. You accept it on yourself. Go get another animal. But if he said, I'm going to bring this animal, so then the animal gets lost. He says, well, I only pledged that one. Maybe I have another one. It doesn't matter. That's not what I pledged. So he's exempt. He's not chayav ba'achrayas. He's not responsible if it gets lost. Holy Indian baltacher. But what about when it comes to delaying? We said we had a whole Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that you're not allowed to delay more than 3 holidays. This whole big machlekes how the holidays work. Zev zeh shaven. The same thing applies, right? Ein bain. The only difference is chayav b'achrayas if it gets lost. When it comes to delaying, you have the same rules. Tanan Hasan was taught in the Mishnah. Ezu neder. What's considered a neder? Ha'imar harei alai oila. A neder is, the vow is, he says, I accept on myself to bring this burnt offering. Ezu nedava, what's considered a donation? Ha'imar harei zu oila. He says, to give this. Mabe nedarim lenedavis. What's the difference? Nedarim, when it comes to a neder, when he says, I accept on myself, so then, if it dies, if it gets stolen or lost, he's responsible to replace it. Nedavais, but if it says, I'm going to bring this one, I'm going to give this, then Mesu Avdu dies, stolen or lost, he's not responsible to replace it. Minani Mili, what's the source? No, once it once he takes the animal, then it becomes holy, right? So if he does a nedava is harezu, so automatically he's making it holy right away. Hare alai means he then has to go later and make it holy.
So if it's gone, can you still theoretically make it rule?
I think it has to be there. It has to be. I think Tumura is utachazu. You're not allowed to do it either way, right? Minani mili. I don't know. Where's the source? The Tana Rabbana was taught in a brayso v'nir tzlei lachaper alav. Will be an appeasement for him, to atone for him when he brings the sacrifice. Reb Shimon Aimer, es she'alav chayav b'achar yusay. What is upon him, he's responsible for. V'she'eino alav ein chayav b'achar yusay. What's not upon him is not responsible for. The Gemara says, "My mashma." Where did he get out of that pasuk? Es she'alav neder nedava. What's it saying? Amar Yitzchak bar Avdi mikiven da amar alai commandator na kaspe dami. Es she'alav, when he says upon me, it's as if he's carrying it on his shoulder. He's taking that responsibility on himself. Es she'alav, it's going on his shoulder. It's like as if he's carrying it, and that's what he'll be responsible for. Otherwise, he's not responsible for it if it gets lost. You ready?
I have a question.
That was a big sugi.
This ton of Rabbana.
Yeah.
Stop this advice, but that little olive takes you over to pasuk from the Chumash.
The Tana Rabbanan is a brayso
But it quotes
that starts with a pasuk. It starts with a pasuk. The brayso starts with a pasuk and continues on saying the opinion of Reb Shimon. Yeah. You're just surprised because usually Tana Rabbanans don't start with a pasuk. They usually also don't start with a name. Usually they start with a general statement, and machlekes would come later. Yeah. Two observations about this. Interesting. Okay, this is a let's see. Should we do it with the introduction? Yeah, we'll try to get through this. Well, let me just introduce what's about to happen. We learned Masechtas Nida, and in Nida we learned about a zava. A zav, a man, is different than a zava. See, by a zava, if she sees one time blood at the wrong time of the month, right, in those 11 days, which she usually doesn't see, so then she's tummy for one more day. It's called Shemeres Yaim. If she sees twice, it means 2 days. She's tummy for one more day as well. Shemeres Yaim. She sees 3 days. Oh, then she has to wait 7 clean days. That's a zava. By a zav, a man that he has a mission that's abnormal. I don't know what it would be. Gonorrhea, they think they call it or something. If it has a physical
Different color, right? It's a coloration.
Yeah, it's also a different color. One is like an egg that's scrambled, or one's not, or whatever. So if he sees once, then he's only tummy for 1 day, but there's a special tumah. He sees twice, then he's already tummy for 7 days, and he has to do 7 nikiyim. Okay, now those twice don't have to be on separate days. Those twice could be in the same day. He sees 3 times, which could be on 3 days, or could be on 1 day. Then he has to bring a sacrifice. So the difference between let's do the Mishnah inside, and then I'll explain what's going to happen in the Gemara. Ein bein zav haraya shteiris l'raya shalish el karban. The difference between two sightings of the zav, and 3 is if he has to bring a sacrifice. The Gemara says, but when it comes to the type of tumah, that what happens there, mishka v'maishav, is that if he lays on top of a bed or a chair or mats, all of those mats become tamei, not just the tumah that like he touched it. Tumah that he touches, he's an avatuma. He touches it, it gets one step removed, it becomes a rishon. But when he sits on those mats, or he lays on this bed or the sheets or whatever it is, they become an avatuma as well. Very strict tumah. It goes to the status of that he's on,
And
which
other
could make a
people-
person tummy.
Tummy also?
Yeah, which
People
can make a
for
person tummy.
a week
If he
or-
touches, no, they don't become tummy for a week.
Oh,
If they touch it, they only become tummy for that day.
that's
But
awesome.
and he's tummy for the week. He has to go to the mikveh and do shiva nekiyim.
But these are only for Kalisha Mikabel Tuma, right?
Yeah.
There's
It
no,
has
it
to
doesn't
be
break the
actually
exception.
those mats have to be considered mishkav u'maishav. They have to be a special thing. Chair, the whole sugya about whole mishnayos about what's considered a chair. Is some a block of wood, a thing. Is anything where the person would say, "Get up and let me do my work." If you sit on it, then that's not considered a chair. I think that's what the rule was in the Mishnah. Someone sits on a a bucket of some sort. Say, "Get out of here! I need to use," then it's not considered a chair. Otherwise, if the person wouldn't say that, then anyway, okay. And he has to count. Minani mili. What's the source for this? 2, 3. That there's a difference. The whole difference is just the sacrifice. Tana Rabbana was taught in the Brayso. Rab Simai Yomer. Rab Simai says, "Mana kasav shtayim b'karitami." The pasuk says, "Ishki yazav mi b'sarei zayvai tame." It says twice in the pasuk the word zav, and then it says tame. That means he gets the full tama after 2 sightings of ziva. Shalish. Then we have another pasuk. Rashi quotes these psukim. It says, "V'zaistia tumasi v'zayvai rar b'sarei yazayvai es oihechten b'sarei mizayvai." It says 3 times the word zav, and then it says v'kari tame, and then it says the word tame. So he's tummy again after 3 times. So Hakate said, how does this work? He's tummy after 2, he's tummy after 3. So it says shtayim l'tumah shalish l'karban. 2 of them make him tummy, and the third one, then he already needs to bring a sacrifice to the temple. How do you know? You just made up this assumption that 2 of them is tuma and 3 of them is a karban. Maybe what it means is 2 of them is tamei and no karban, like you said, but 3 of them is a karban, but he's not tamei. The Gemara says, what? Amrit achlei shalish rosh tayim. He saw twice before he saw 3, and he was tamei already. How did the tuma go off just because he saw one more time? It doesn't work like that. If he was tamei, then he would have to resolve that tuma by waiting 7 days and then going to the mikveh. It doesn't go off just by seeing again. Okay, so it's not going to be this one's tamei and no carbon, and this one's carbon, no tam. Maybe the way it works is like this: when he sees twice, he has to bring a carbon, but he's not tamei. He sees 3 times, he becomes tummy. Umar says, don't think like that. The Tanya was taught in a Brayso, Hashem, the Kayan will atone in front of Hashem from his Zayv. Now it says, mi Zayvai, from his Zayv. It's saying, Miktsas Zavin may be in carbon, and Miktsas Zavin ain't may be in carbon. Mi Zayvai, it's only from, not all. Aha, that means not every zav brings a carbon. So Hakate said, how does this work? Rosh Shalish maybe, maybe only if you see 3 times you bring a carbon, not twice. Ayin el ra beis maybe Rosh Shalish, maybe it's the other way. Maybe if he sees twice, he has to bring a carbon. If he sees 3 times, he doesn't have to bring a carbon. We use the same logic as before. Amrit achlei Rosh Shalish Rosh Tayim. But you had 2 sightings before you had 3, and you already chayiv in a carbon. It doesn't go off because you see again, right? So now the Gemara says, we had 2 sources that tell me 2 is tuma and 3 is carbon. 2 sources for that. And we need both of those sources. Because if you would just have what Rab Simai says, that it says twice zav, and then the third one, and then it says tamei, and then it says 3 times zav, and then it says tamei. So Habe Amina, if it would only say that, kikushin, I would have the problem. The problem was that maybe the 2 is the carbon and the 3 is the tuma. Maybe he brings a carbon before it becomes tummy. Sees twice, brings a carbon. we didn't have the question on that, but he sees twice before he sees three, it would be clear. 2 is a carbon, 3 is the tumah. So kamashlan mizayvai. So I need the brisa of mizayvai to tell me that not everyone brings a carbon. Only some zavim bring a carbon. That tells me only if you see 3 times, but some don't. If you see twice, he's a zav and he doesn't. Be mizayvai, if it would only say that one, la yadana kamarias. I wouldn't know if it's 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. I would know that it's only some. Maybe it's, if you see 4 times, then you don't, you tame, and if you see 5 times, then you have to bring a carbon. It wouldn't tell me. So kamash mandrab simai that it's 2 or 3. Bahashtadam mizayva lidrasha. Okay. Now that you said that mizayva is a drasha, that tells me that it's only some and not all. So the chayitar azav mizayva my derashtabe. When the zav becomes tahar, what do you learn from that? It says, what does it mean? Only some become tahar. Only some of them. It's going to do the whatever he needs to do is to bring the sacrifice and go to the mikveh. It says hahu that we need mibayleila kedetani. We need for what it's taught in another brisa. The chayitar azav l'kshifsak mizayvai. When he stops seeing mizayvai, from when he stops seeing v'lay mizayvai v'nigay, but not if he's, let's say he has 2 problems. One is that he's a zav, and he's also a mitzayra. So the rule is that he becomes perfectly pure after, if it would just be a zav. But if he's also a mitzayra, then he can actually, he would go to the mikveh right when his tzaras is over, and that would take care of the zav as well. The first, the mitzayra has to go to the mikveh twice.
Yeah.
But the first time going to the mikveh would also be for the zav, but he wouldn't go to the mikveh while he was still a mitzayra, because he was still a, yeah. Mizayvai v'sifer. From his ziva, and he counts. Limit al zav b'asteriya shetzan sphere shiva. That's coming to tell me mizayvai from being a zav. That tells me that not everyone. That's what does that tell me now over here? That tells me that if he sees twice, then he counts 7. Okay. The Gemara says, "V'lei dinhu." I could have figured that out anyway. Imitami mishka mumayshav le'yatan sphere shiva. He is so impure that he makes the mats under him tameh with an avatuma. Shouldn't he have to count 7 days? And where it says, well, that's not necessarily so, because shemer shem keneged yom techiyah. Remember when they had to wait 1 day? That also had the same tumah. What they sit on becomes tameh, but they don't have to count 7 days. So that would not be a kal v'chaimer, that if you have such a strict tumah, automatically 7 days, because we find other ones that are so strict and it's not 7 days. It has a strict tumah, but it's not 7 days. So don't be surprised about this. That even though it has a strict tumah, it should not require 7 days until I have the pasuk that tells me that it does. So Talmud Laimar mizayva v'sifer, the mixed zayvai, that some of them v'sifer, and even if it's only twice, he has to count. Limit al zav bal steriya shetan sphere shiva. He sees twice, he has to count the 7 days. Amali Rav Papa la Abaya. Rav Papa is a student of Abaya, asks a very strong question. Ma'ishna hai mizayve de marbi bezav bal sterius. Ma'ishna hai mizayve de memayet bezav bal sterius. Over there we said, not when it says mi zayvai, it says not every zav needs to bring a carbon. Not every zav needs to bring a carbon, only some of them. Mi zayvai, some of them. And over here we're saying that mi zayvai, even a partial zav, needs to count 7 days. So one of them is include. Here we're saying mizayvai means from being a zav is including even a zav that had 2 sightings, and mizayvai at the same time is excluding a zav that only saw 2 times, and only the 3 times zav has to bring the carbon. So it's from being a zav is either saying only from being a full zav, but not all of them, or it's saying from even a partial. So how do you do both of those? That same word is being used in 2 different ways, opposite ways. One is inclusive and one is exclusive. So if you wanted to tell me that that mizayva is coming to tell me that he does not need to count 7 days because he only saw twice. If he sees 3 times, he needs to count 7 days. So lishta kramine, so don't say anything. Didn't say anything. Then I wouldn't know that he had to count 7 days. So it must be the fact that it's saying it is coming to include. Because if it wanted to exclude, then just don't say anything. But maybe you tell me that I would know that he has to count 7 days because I would have a kal v'chaimer. So we say you don't have a kal v'chaimer. Why? Because because I have this woman that, or even the man, that waits 1 day in Tumah. He doesn't wait 7 days, but he still has the strict Tumah. So I would not know 7 days without the pasuk. But maybe you'll tell me that I need it. That tells me that it's only mizayvai, but not someone that has tzaras as well. So imkein lichtav krav v'chiyiter azav lishtek. It would just say that's from the word zav. That's not from mizayvai. So that would just say v'chiyiter azav when the zav becomes pure. Mizayvai lamali, that extra word. That's going to tell me that he has to count 7 days. What we learned from this Mishnah is that the difference between a zav of 2 riyas and a zav of 3 riyas is not the 7 days. Both of them have 7 days that they have to count. Shiva Nikiyim. The difference is just that carbon that the one that saw 3 times. Okay, let's leave it here.
Wow. That's enough.